Hello everyone and welcome to the VanillaSoft Intellective Routing Part 2 webinar today. Thank you again for joining us for our 1-hour presentation on the more advanced features of VanillaSoft. I'm the Director of Product Management here at VanillaSoft. My name is Kevin Baker. I will be the host for today and I'll be answering, same as last webinar, I'll be answering the questions through the ReadyTalk interface on the chat window on the left-hand side of the screen. And joining me today, the same again as last week, is Mr. Daniel Sims, who is our Customer Success Team Manager. Daniel, are you there with me?
Yes, sir. Hello, everybody.
So without further ado, I will pass things over to Mr. Daniel Sims, our Customer Success Team Manager.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Let me go ahead and get my monitor up here, and we will kick things off. Okay, so as Kevin mentioned, this is a part 2 to our last meeting. To give a quick overview of what this is going to be about today, today's meeting is still focused on the new routing system that we have dubbed Intellective Routing. Last week's meeting, the initial walkthrough was specific on what had changed. So a quick recap on what we had gone over then was the fact that now we have Intellective Routing, where before we had routing filters. And on this intellective routing, we just kind of touched on what was different, how to use a basic routing filter still, how to assign routing filters to your team, to your agents, and get them live, as well as how to grant or deny access to callers, your team, to be able to create, modify, assign filters themselves. So that was the basics, just looking at what was new, what was different, and what had changed. Today, we're specifically looking at the brand new functionality, the two things that we did not touch upon last week. The first being advanced routing filters, which will be probably the second thing actually we look at today. Advanced routing filters introduce the possibility of priority groups, which is something we didn't have before, as well as nested and or comparisons, which I'll clarify and explain later, as well as our brand new function of geolocation filters. That's the other thing that we'll be going over today. So if anyone has not yet watched the first webinar, either the live one or the recording, some of this may not make as much sense, unfortunately, just because we're going straight into the more advanced stuff. But hopefully everyone is more or less up to speed. If you are not, we do have the recording available on our website for you to review afterwards. So what we'll do today, we're going to start off with geolocation, and then we'll get to advanced. I think we'll go in that order. As Kevin mentioned, if you have questions, anything comes up, type them in the chat window. As you think of them, Kevin will flag them, and we'll address them after the presentation here today. So geolocation filters. I'm going to go into my custom area project for this one. So first of all, what geolocation filters are is it's something that lets you do kind of advanced mapping, where, as the name suggests, geolocation, it's based on the physical location of your prospects in the world. And this is a worldwide functionality, so it'll work pretty much anywhere that you go. The one big caveat, though, because today, as some of you may be aware, we have some proximity-based functionality, which is basically based off of a zip or postal code. And sometimes it can be based off of the contact's current location as another option, but it just draws a circular radius around a central point. So if I say within 10 miles of this zip code, it's going to route everything, as the name suggests, it's within 10 miles of that zip code, and that's about it. Geolocation lets you dig a little bit deeper. It looks really cool as well. We'll get to that in a moment. The one thing I do want to clarify, you must have the latitude and longitude for your contacts in order for geolocation filters to work. So if you only have the address, the zip code, etc., that's not enough. We need to get more precise because this is more advanced. It needs to be precise. We need latitude and longitude. There's a number of services out there that will get you latitude and longitude. You give them a list of your contacts with the address and they'll spit out the lat long. Or you may already be able to get them from your vendors, but that is necessary to have. And the way you would get those, I'll just quickly show, is the way you put those into your system, they are just fields you can map to. So when you do your standard input mapping, you will see there is latitude and there is longitude. So I just wanted to clarify that. If you try to use geolocation filters on a project that is loaded with leads that do not have latitude and longitude, you just won't see any contacts in there. Effectively you'll be filtering nothing because it just won't see that there are any things eligible to be filtered. So with that preface in place, let's dig in. So geolocation filters, one thing to note is that these are effectively created on the admin side only. These are administrative filters only. They're not user-specific, I should say. I should qualify that. They can be done on the caller side, but they are not user-specific filters. They are centralized. What we can do here is we can go ahead and click on Manage Geolocation Filters, and you'll see, just like with routing filters, I have a list of my existing filters. I can copy them, delete them, and see who they might be assigned to currently. But let's go ahead and make us a new one. So if I click on Manage Geolocation Filters, that is going to load me up a map. There's a little loading icon, and you'll see these little red dots here and green and different colored dots. So what that loading did, it loaded in the contacts that I'm seeing here. And if I were to move this around, it's going to reload and see if there are contacts located elsewhere. So this is just a world map. I mean, I can go anywhere I want to. And actually, there's a way you can maximize this window just to give you a little bit more real estate. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I've only got the leads in here. I only have a small sampling of leads for demo purposes loaded in here. But these are all contacts with geolocation filters. So first of all, with this geolocation manager right here, this is how we're going to add a geolocation filter in. It's also how we can look at or modify existing filters. So if I wanted to open a filter that was in here, I could do that through this tool. And we can also see what's available to our team and what's not available. Some of these can be tagged as unavailable to callers. But before we even delve into all of that, let's just talk about what we're looking at here. So these circles with the numbers, these are effectively little heat maps of contacts. So I'm zoomed out quite a bit. I can see all of the United States in this screen here. So I'm fairly zoomed out. And these are telling me where leads are clustered. So I've got 33 contacts near Cheyenne, right? I've got 335 near Omaha. We can kind of see where these clusters are. But as we zoom in, and you can do that with the plus or minus over here or just using your mouse wheel, as we zoom in, let's say I'm going to go over here towards Oklahoma, as you can see, these clusters break apart. Because the closer we get, we can say, well, there's 291 contacts in this area. But what that means as we zoom in closer, obviously that could be, hopefully is, several miles worth of land, right, at least, that we're looking at here. So as we continue to zoom in, these numbers get lower and the heat areas break out. And where we see these little blue dots, those are individual leads, individual contacts. And you'll see they kind of get lighter as they go. The darker red being the higher number of clusters, the orange being, still fairly high, double digits, and then we have the green for smaller numbers. But as I continue to zoom in, these continue breaking into different little subclusters, if you will. You'll see we've now lost the red color clusters, the dark red at least. And as we keep zooming in, it continues to break these up and show me in more and more detail where these contacts, where these leads are located. So that is the first step of this. That's kind of how you can how you view this, how you translate these leads. So it gives you a very visual representation of what you're working with in each area and in each location. So that is the first piece of this. Now to go over here as well, to go to this top search area, this is just a way to quickly let you find a location on the map. So let's say I wanted to pivot suddenly to Omaha. If I just type in Omaha, it'll try to find me the correct Omaha. Sometimes if you typed in, like, for example, London or Paris, it's probably going to take you to Paris, France, not Paris, Texas, but you get the idea. And you can put Omaha, any. I mean, it's just a search effectively like you do with Google Maps or any mapping system, really. So that's what that tool there is. Now for the rest of this, let's go ahead and create a geolocation filter. And you can see I've got 4 sample ones in here already, just from different testing we've done in this project while we've been working with this and tweaking with it and playing around with it. But I'm going to go ahead and make us a new one here today. So let me zoom in a little bit more here on Omaha. And so we can see these little clusters of leads here that I have. So I'm going to click on Add Geolocation Filter. Now, the first thing I can do here is give this geolocation filter a name. So I might just call this Dan Omaha Filter. Now, if you see at the top, what it's asking me to do is it says, please start drawing your geolocation filters area by clicking on the map. So what we're actually doing is we are drawing some sort of polygon shape here to capture the leads that we want to work with. So let's say I wanted to work with the majority of these contacts here. I might say, well, let's start right here. This is going to be my starting point. And if I click here it's going to put a pin. I put it right on a red road, so it might be hard to see there. Let me redraw this actually, just so it's a little clearer. So let me click over here. There we go. So you can see that red pin that shows up right there. So that's the start of my area that I'm creating. So let's say I wanted to draw a line from here to downtown Omaha. So I can click over here. It creates that initial line for me. And what we want to do is create a square, triangle, hexagon, any fun shape you want to come up with to capture these leads that I want to include in this filter. So let's say we go down past Old Market, maybe into Riverview, and then we go over here back onto the main highway, and we go back up to my first point. So it's shading in this area. So I've just drawn a filter that's going to calculate and pull in any contact that lies within this shape that I drew. And we can, I'm going to click redraw again. That just lets me redo this drawing in case I mess up maybe, or I need to start again. It's just going to clear that and let me start fresh. This can be any weird shape you want as long as these lines still are capturing something, right? So I couldn't, for example, put a line way over here. It's not going to want me to do that because then what am I drawing? So as long as it's something that is capturing something within it, it connects back to this starting red icon here, this little red pin, then anything that's in that drawing that I made, it's capturing. So as you can see already, this is letting you get a lot more granular with how you're filtering and what you're capturing in these geolocation filters or proximity type filters. Now, another function of this is you'll see this checkbox here for Enable Directional Routing. So what that's going to do, if I go ahead, let's say I have a hotel or I have an outside rep. This is the common scenario. We have an outside agent. We're sending them off to Omaha. Maybe their hotel is somewhere over here. So I might say, all right, well, we're going to, capture everything going down probably this main road. Maybe they're going to spend some time in downtown Omaha. So we'll go ahead and capture some of the information in here and draw some sort of shape. Now, when my team is calling to book appointments for this outside agent, I don't really want them to have a 9 a.m. appointment here on Lake Street and then a 4 o'clock appointment down here on Leavenworth Street and then another one back here on North 16. I don't want them to have to zigzag across. I'd ideally like it to kind of flow where the appointments start up maybe towards where the hotel is and then organically work their way down. And the easiest way to do that, of course, is to make sure that they route to my team in that order. So what we can do by enabling this directional routing, if we check this box, it gives us a new icon to play with, this little flag right here. And anywhere I place this flag, this acts as a starting point for routing, and it effectively routes outward from that point. So it emanates outward. So if I put my flag right here, this contact right here is the first one my team would see. Then they'd see these two over here. Then they'd see the one on Seward Street. Then they'd see the one on Hamilton. It would keep going outward from this initial flag point. And if something became available that was closer to the flag because of the result codes and the end of queues and retries, et cetera, that would then gain priority because, again, it's closest to this starting flag point. So it can be a very useful tool if you have outside reps, if you need this sort of directional-based routing. That's what this is for. That's what it's designed for. Oftentimes, sometimes that may not be the right tool. You don't have to have it there. You can just say anything in this area, which is what I'm going to do. So that is kind of the basics of geolocation. It looks really good, as you can tell. I mean, it gives you a lot of interaction. It's not just being a zip code in and watching it kind of create a circle. This is letting you do whatever you want, capture whatever records you want. And once I save this, I'll go ahead and make sure it's available to callers. Once I save this, it becomes available in this list. And just like the other filters, it gives me a count of how many I've drawn. So in all these little, buttons, the blue, I don't have to go in here and count and do math myself, thank goodness. It's just going to tell me there are 23 contacts that I've captured in this filter. So that is the very basics. I can delete any of these. I can redraw them. If I want to modify what area I'm capturing in here, we can add or remove that directional routing on the fly. So if I went to another one of these, appointments for Dave, I'm not sure where this is going to take me. Okay, so this takes me somewhere else in, near Omaha, it looks like, and we can see what this looks like. It's got 334 in its pool. It is using directional routing, and again, I could delete it, redraw it, rename it, etc. So that is about the basics here. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce the size just so I'm back in my menu. This brings my menu back, so I'm out of the full screen mode. And now that we have this created, so again, if we go back to the main Intellective Routing page here, under geolocation filters, we now see that Dan Omaha filter is there. And if I were to go to filter assignment, whether it's users in this project or other users, only one person's actually in this project right now, but the same way I would assign routing filters like we went over last week, I can now assign proximity filters as well. So JF here currently has 1,508 contacts available with no filters being applied, but I could go ahead and apply Dan's Omaha filter. That's going to reduce that number to 23. And as I kind of alluded to last week, but I'll reiterate here, as we can see, this does actually interact with routing filters as well. So if we apply a routing filter with a proximity filter, we can see here that that gives me no contacts. So at a glance, I can say, you know what? I probably don't want to apply these two filters to JF right now, or else he's not calling anything. So I need to change one or the other so I can expand this list so that maybe he's got a little bit more than 0 contacts to work with here. But that's kind of how those interact and how those get assigned. And then very quickly, just to show it's going to be exactly the same, but just so we highlight it, if any of you are having your team, your agents, do their proximity or do their geolocation mapping, it's going to look basically the same. If I go to my CRM, my Intellective Routing filters, once again, I've got my proximity routing filters option available here, and I can go ahead and select one of those pre-made filters for me. So I can select the Dan Omaha filter. It's then going to load that map in and load those records in. So at that point, takes me to where I need to see this information and will show me what's going on and what I'm working with here. Again, this is only available if you are giving this capability, if you're allowing your team to have access to proximity routing, caller-side proximity routing. Then they have the option to switch between filters. So that basically covers it for the geolocation. Again, it looks really good. I mean, it's beautiful looking. It's really, really advanced. It's really slick. If it's something you need to do, if location-based dialing is something you do or would like to do, this is huge. The only restriction is you do need the latitude, longitude, but it lets you get extremely detailed, extremely granular. It gives you a ton of transparency on what you're working with and in what's going to be queued up for you. So that is geolocation filters in a nutshell. Now we're going to move on to my favorite, the big star of the release in my eyes, at the very least. Advanced Intellective Routing filters. So let's go back to my Acme Sales Leads project for this one. Go to Intellective Routing. All right, I'm going to make a new filter. So we kind of touched on this in the first one, just very briefly. We touched on this just to qualify, well, what's that Enable Advanced Mode button? What's it for? So I'm going to call this Dan Test. I'll go ahead and just make a basic filter. We'll just do one of email, not blank. That's an easy one. And so we all remember, hopefully, we remember this routing filter. It's this, very basic. I pick my field, I find comparison, my operator here, and then I can select values if there's a case where I need value. So if I wanted to say email starts with, right, then I can enter a value over here. I can then add multiple things and say if the email is not blank and the lead source is XYZ, or I could say, instead of and, I could say or the lead source is XYZ, right? So I can start building this out however I want. Let me go ahead and do that. If lead source is in you, or you. So we already went over this, and that's just a standard filter. I calculate the contact count, I save it, and then that is what would be applied to whoever I assign that to. It's just only showing things where the email are not blank, or lead source is one of these three, full stop. With advanced mode, if I click Enable Advanced Mode, I get some more options. Now, first off, when you click Enable Advanced Mode, it's going to warn you, and I know we covered this last week because we want to make sure we cover this with everyone. It's going to give you a warning. Once you convert a routing filter into an advanced filter and you save it, there is no going back. You cannot say, oh, I don't need all this. I don't need these weird priority groups and everything. Let me take this back to a normal filter. This is confusing. You cannot go back once you do this. It is only for the one filter, so it's not like you can never use a basic filter again, but I just want to make everyone clear that if you do this, it is to stay. It is for keeps. So I'm going to go ahead and hit confirm. and we will convert this to an advanced filter. Now this is what we're looking at now is the beginning of an advanced filter, and what you're probably thinking is this does not look as impressive as the geolocation did, and you're right, but hopefully I'll change your mind on that once we dig into what this is actually going to do for you. So the first thing you'll notice, what this has done is instead of just having these two things up here full stop, it's now converted these to a priority 1. So this is a priority 1 filter. Because what advanced filters does, first and foremost, is it introduces the concept of priority. So I can say priority 1 are anything with an email address is not blank, or the lead source is one of these 3. And with the normal filter, again, that's full stop. But with these priorities, I can say, well, let's add a priority. Let's add another one. So priority 2, meaning that if there are no more leads to be routed that have an email address or that are in one of these 3 lead sources, then the next filter to be applied is whatever I build here. So let's say the next one I want to go off of something like result count. So I could say if result count is equal to or less than, less than or equal to 1. So that means they've been called either never been called or they've been called only once. This second filter will apply, and I can even add something else. So I could say and lead source is in one of these several. I don't know what I'm clicking. All right. And we can keep adding other priorities. So the third priority is anything that matches this criteria. The other thing you'll see is that in addition to the standard and or that we had here, so I've got for priority 1, email, not blank, or lead source in one of these 3, we can add separate and or groups on top of that. So I could say if it's one of these 2 or, and it creates a whole new block that I can then also create and or comparisons under. So as you can see, you can make some pretty complex priority groupings here, some pretty complex filters built out here. It can get a little bit nutty. And I'll be talking about in the last leg of this, once we touch on the mechanics, I'll talk about a few example use cases and why this might be important to you depending on different industries. But please do continue to ask questions that might be relevant to you or what you're doing, and we can answer them in the Q&A. So because I don't want to get this complex, I'm going to get rid of some of these, but hopefully this opens, puts a light bulb on for just exactly what you can do. You can have a whole section of criteria that can match, or if it doesn't match all those criteria, it could match this other set of criteria. Or maybe it has to match any of these 4 things and any of these 8 things, right? So I mean, there's just a lot of control you have over with the routing that plays in nicely with your result codes and your frequency follow-ups. So that's the basics for priority groups. The other thing, the other concept here that kind of not introduces really, but kind of carries over, if you will, is that these priority groups, any of these priority filters, can be converted and made into what's called a top-level filter. Because right now, these just happen in order, basically. And once this filter falls off, so once I get through everything that's an email not blank or a lead source in one of these 3, then the next filter just takes over, and anything that's being filtered in here is not being looked at anymore. Same thing with priority 3, this one takes over. So my priority 2s, it's not still looking at email not blank unless I were to build out email not blank as another filter in here. By setting a top level filter, it's effectively filtering this entire list down based on whatever criteria I set up here. So if I want to just say, look, I might have 10,000 contacts in here. Let's use this top level filter. Maybe it gets it down to 5,000. And then those groups and everything else I do is only filtering those 5,000 contacts, because this top level filter is effectively not looking at or eliminating those other 5,000 from this intellective routing filter. So that's a basic of what this is, and I'm not even sure what I'd want to. Well, here's a good one. I could just say if any phone number starts with, I don't know, some country code. I can't even fathom what I want to do here. But so we can pull in whatever we want here as a top level filter. And I'll actually, just so this will look better, I'm going to just pull this down to anything that has been, I'm not even sure. We'll just do anything that has no email. We'll stick with that. Or anything with no, maybe with no status. Anything without a lead status. For whatever reason, if I want to ignore anything that doesn't already have a status assigned to it, this is going to create that top-level filter. And as you see, the top-level filter, same way, can have and and or comparisons, and as well as and or groups with their own sub and or comparisons. The last thing that this introduces, that's an actual technical feature here, is the option or the concept of routing remaining contacts as a last priority. And this is another one I think that we touched on briefly in the last meeting. But with the old filters, the way the routing filters used to work, you would build this filter and it would route those contacts, and that would be that. Full stop, nothing else gets routed, right? If it's not captured in that filter, it just gives a message that says, hey, there are no more leads available to be routed. With the route remaining contacts, we can build filters, again, as priorities. This top-level filter is still functioning the way that I just described, where it's saying, no, where anything here is being filtered by this, full stop. But with these priority groups, if I come up with my priority target 1, my priority target 2, my tier 1, tier 2, and that's really all I come up with for now, I can just say, all right, well, if they get through these, if there's nothing of my tier 1 or nothing of my tier 2 available, then let them call whatever else is in there. Whatever else I didn't build out for that's able to route, then they can see that, just so that they're not sitting at looking at a screen that says there's no contacts left. So that's the last thing that's new and that's added in here. And so if I take this this weird filter that I've created here, and I say let's calculate the contact count, it effectively does a query to find, well, how many are in here currently with all these different metrics. And for what I have, I've got none. None of these have lead status blank. Let me actually shift this then to something easier. So let's say not blank. This should be basically everything then. So if I calculate this contact, there we go. So if I calculate this contact count, I've got 416 contacts available from this top-level filter. And that's what this means right here, right? So this is 416 that are available from this top-level filter. Next, I've got 198 that are set as my priority 1. I have none set as priority 2, which may mean that I have no contacts that have been resulted one or fewer times with this lead source, or it could be that any contacts I do have that would fall under this criteria already fell under priority 1, right? So if 30 of these maybe could have been a priority 2, obviously there's not really a point in showing them twice. If they're already in a higher priority, that's where they're going to reside, right? That's just the nature of how this stuff would work. And then lastly, from my 2 filters, my priority 1, priority 2, I have 218 that don't match any of the criteria I set up. And because I've checked this box down here, those would then route after these 198 had been called and had gone through and were no longer available. So that is the basics of how you would structure this. And what I might do, because I can see, oh, well, priority 2 has nothing in here, I might narrow this down. I might change it and not put that much restriction on it. I could have maybe changed that just to an or instead of an and that would have accomplished a similar thing. But if I just remove this, maybe it gets some more. There we go. So now I've got 207 as priority 2 and only 11 remaining contacts. So I've expanded my filter, expanded my criteria a little bit for this filter. And then when I save this, it simply becomes an available filter that I can then assign, right? So if we go back, this is called Dan Test. If we go back to the Intellective Routing page, there is Dan Test, and I can now, just as before, I can assign that to my caller. So I can take the Dan Test. It's going to tell me, hey, this means there's 417 total available. 70 are available now for this user. And if you remember, that's based on things like, well, what's available by calling period, or what team are they in, or maybe some of these 416 leads might be owned by someone else. So this is just letting you know this is the total that's captured by that filter, and the total that ends up being available. This is a more reliable number to use if you want to know what's available right now for this user. And then so it's just taking all those various things into consideration and then filtering it down to say, if you were to apply this and hit save right now, 70 contacts. That's what that would boil down to for Daniel at acme.com. He'd have 70 contacts currently available in his pool. So that's the basics of the advanced filtering. So hopefully a lot of you, that sparked some ideas and some thoughts on what you can do and how you can build these groups and these filters. And to be honest, everyone here at VanillaSoft, we're really interested to see what you can come up with and see what you build out with this, because we've thought a lot about it, obviously, to build it out. We have a lot of scenarios playing around in our head, but seeing the live use case is what we're really looking forward to here. So, but this is a system where you could say, our first priority based on the metrics, based on the data. So this is also where you can really start leveraging your reports and leveraging your metrics. Because we could say, based on our data, people with a certain title, people who are the CFOs, our CFOs are the target. So I could say priority 1 maybe is anyone that with a title that contains CFO, or is CFO equal to, or starts with CFO, or even just contains maybe it's something where I'm doing IT, and so I could just say IT, whether it's director of IT or senior IT consultant, anything IT, that's my first target. So I can make that my first priority, and then we could build on something here that says title contains IT and they've been contacted fewer than X times, right? Or and we have their website and their revenue is greater than a certain value. And we can make that the first priority. The second priority could be similar. It could be title contains IT, but we don't bother with the revenue restriction, or we lessen the revenue constriction. Maybe this is annual revenue more than 10 million, and the next one is between 5 and 10 million, and the third one is 5 million or less, right? And we can continue building this out. Now, here's another scenario: is VanillaSoft. We've since our inception, we're basically a sales CRM that then evolved to workflow automation, and now with the evolution, with the emergence of the term cadence for business, right? Sales cadence. We are cadence automation software is a good way of describing what we do. We automate the follow-up, we automate the outreach, and all the tools that kind of are connected therein. So a lot of times people will ask, well, what about things like lead scoring? Because hopefully a lot of you know you can do some lead scoring in VanillaSoft. We have, with custom fields, you can do formulas, you can do calculations based on custom fields, and ultimately come up with some number. And a lot of you might be getting things fed in, maybe from marketing automation platforms, maybe from vendors that score these leads or give a percentage to close. Again, this is where Intellective Routing comes into play, where you can say, well, priority 1 is anything with a lead score higher than X. Priority 2 is a lead score between X and Y, right? And you can keep building this out and tie to that other criteria as well, because maybe just a high lead score is great, and that's still a top priority, but to be priority 1, it's this lead score and these other metrics that are important, that are specific to what I want. Priority 2 is that same lead score with a different set of metrics, a different set of criteria. So you can continue filtering this down, and because of the expanded field list that we have here, because we can filter based off of now call history, we can filter based off of anything related to the contact information. We can even filter based off of email data. If you want to be calling as a first priority people who have opened your emails, right, where the email response was open, right, where they have read that email. That is something that we want to build in here, and maybe we also say, and the last email template was a certain template, right? The last email template name was equal to a certain email template that we sent out, the brochure. Anyone who opened and read our brochure, that's one of our priorities. That's priority 3. That's priority 1. This is the kind of stuff you can start thinking about and start building out and creating different subsets then of what we want to look at. So I could probably, I'm just trying to think if there's any major common ones that I want to make sure I touch on, but I could probably ramble for hours about what this means for the system. You can make another example. Let's say you're doing B2B outreach, and so you have a phone field for the main business line, but you also have a direct number line. Well, maybe anyone you have the direct number for should be a higher priority. They should have higher weight because you have a way of bypassing the gatekeeper with them. And so if they become available, they're the first person you want to call. Again, just anything like that you've thought of, like, hey, this is where we see more success, or this is the high value targets for us. Now, in addition to the result codes, queuing up the priority, saying, let's follow up every few hours or once a day, or let's do this sort of outreach cadence where we're sending an email, we're sending a text, and we're doing this, we're doing that. All of that's still happening. But then when they become available again, this is determining where they should they be seen first? Is this our hottest group possible? If so, let's put them in front of our team first, or in front of these people first. And again, this also plays into the live transfer of leads, the import of leads, because this check to see what criteria matches is triggering every second. On a second-to-second basis, it's checking, has anything matched this? Has someone in the last second opened this brochure email? If so, boom, they're in priority 1 now. Right? So it's constantly running these checks to see what would match this criteria, and constantly updating and shifting your calling queue based on these priorities. So with that, we've got about 20 minutes left here, and I want to make sure if anyone does have questions, because this is a big game changer for VanillaSoft for how we do routing. So I want to make sure we get to any questions that we do have, and we have enough time left. So I'm going to go ahead and kick things back to Mr. Kevin Baker, and we'll go ahead and field whatever questions might have come in.
Great job, Daniel. Thank you. I'm excited with your enthusiasm on this. It's an awesome feature we've just introduced. We only have one question in right now, so as Daniel said, I would encourage anyone that has any questions on their specific process or workflow, or maybe Daniel's confused them a little bit on something. If you have anything at all that you want us to touch on again, we're more than happy to take the time to do so. But the one question so far, Daniel, is from Sam, and he's asked probably a bit more from the intro perspective to explain the advanced button again. So maybe just give him a little bit of an intro on the basic filter and then switching to the advanced side.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to actually go back, and it'll ask me, are you sure you want to leave this? You'll lose unsaved changes, because I am effectively. So that's another thing as well. If you start something and you haven't calculated, you haven't saved, it will warn you. It will let you know, hey, you haven't saved this, because it would be a bummer to build one of those really complex filters out and then accidentally click somewhere else and lose it. So we did put that in place at least. So I'm going to actually go ahead and calculate this. I know my priority 1 filter is probably not going to have anything yet. But I'll go ahead and calculate and save anyway. Okay, perfect. So now when I go back to this page, so the advanced filter button. So when I add a routing filter, so if I go to my Intellective Routing page and I click Add Routing Filter, this is what I see by default. I can give it a name, and I can do one set of things and create and or statements based off that. So I can create one filter based off whatever criteria I want, and then say and or. But we also have this Enable Advanced Mode button. When you click this button, it gives you that warning that I mentioned earlier that says this is a more complex filter process. We try to warn you as much as possible that this is, you're going down the rabbit hole a little bit. This opens up a lot of options, and once you make this change, once you save this filter, you cannot go back. There's no disable advanced mode, right? It's a step forward, but you cannot then step backward. So once I click confirm, I enter the realm of advanced mode. You see that button is gone now, and that is what then creates the option for priority, for the top level filter, for the route remaining contacts, for the and or groups, etc. Until I click advanced mode, it's effectively operating just as a standard filter, right? This is the more advanced, the heavy hitting option that gets you a lot more involved, a lot more in depth here. So hopefully that answers that question, Sam, about what that advanced mode is and what it does. And you'll see again, it's asking me, do you want to leave it, because I have not hit save. I'm going to confirm I don't want to save this. I don't want to do that here. But that's how that works there. And since we haven't had any questions yet, one I just saw, it is specific to each filter added. Correct, 100% correct. So great question, Sam. Each filter that you create will be either the standard filter or an advanced filter. If I were to add a new filter, just because I enabled advanced mode on the Dan test one, it doesn't mean all of my filters have to be advanced. Since there aren't too many questions, as it turns out, I'll go ahead and throw in a couple other things. One being that your callers, right? So if we give caller side access, as I've done here. Actually, no, I haven't. I haven't given any access. Let me go ahead and grant access. If we give caller side access, where they have the ability to modify their own filters, their own routing filters, whether we say they can do this for all fields or if I restrict certain fields, etc., a caller cannot convert a filter from a normal filter to an advanced filter. So if me, an administrator, if I either assign them an advanced filter that I've created for them, because I can do that, right? I can make a user-specific filter and create it. Like if I hit new user filter, I can create that new user filter as an advanced filter. Or if they have a filter, an existing user filter, I can modify that existing user filter and convert it into advanced mode by going to edit. So I can convert it to advanced mode. The caller themselves cannot voluntarily switch something from the standard routing filter into an advanced filter. We did that again just because the warning we give, it is a lot more advanced, and we want to make sure that if you are going to grant access to your callers, that it's being vetted properly, that it's being given and granted by you, the administrator, instead of something they maybe stumble upon, see a button that says advanced, click it without really thinking too much, or just saying, oh, I like advanced things, and then now their filter is maybe stuck in something they didn't really want. So just wanted to qualify that really quick. The advanced filters as well as proximity filters, both of these are available for the by user or the by team option. They both work the same way and interact with each other the same way as they do on a per user basis. Yeah, and I think that's the key pieces. So if there aren't any, this was a faster webinar than I was anticipating, but if there aren't any other questions, most of this was covered in the first webinar. I suppose I'm realizing. I know we did delve into a little bit the advanced filters. The same way as with the basic filters, you can delete them, you can copy them and clone them. If you're going to start messing with advanced filters, even now after today's webinar, we still, just like we did last week, we recommend if you're going to modify an existing filter you have, copy it first. Just that way you have a backup. So I just copied that. Now I have a backup of test. I can leave my live filter alone. I don't have to mess with it live. I can just work with this, convert this one to advanced, and get it set up. And then if I like it, I can switch it over, maybe get rid of this one, and use that as the primary filter that I have running. But other than that, I think we've touched on the key points. You'll be seeing more resources come up, obviously, on this as things progress. But we just wanted to make sure that everyone here today, kind of the quote-unquote early access group, was able to see this information and had it available.
Great, Daniel. Thank you. Good job as always. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating in our webinar today. I will have the recording emailed to you either later this afternoon or tomorrow morning at the latest. And I do apologize. There were a couple of audio technical problems at the beginning and in the middle, so we'll do our best to edit those out, and I'll listen to it all to make sure that the sound is fine before we send it out. So if you don't get to it tomorrow morning, that will be the delay with that. But with that, thank you again for joining us for the webinar today. Don't hesitate to contact our technical support team if you have any questions at all. But good luck with your implementation and good luck with the new use of this filter, and have yourself a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.